The night sky above the alien city was filled with smoke and neon lights. Crowds moved through the marketplace, their voices mixing with the sound of hammers, cages, and the cries of creatures not free. Daniel, a human traveler, walked slowly through the crowd, his eyes sharp and tired. He had seen many strange things on alien worlds, but this market was worse than anything he remembered. The place was called the Market of Chains here. Life was bought and sold. Merchants shouted prices, guards pushed slaves forward, and buyers laughed while pointing at the weak. Daniel felt disgust in his chest, but he kept walking, telling himself not to get involved. He was only a visitor, only a man passing through. But then he heard a small cry, soft, trembling, almost like a whisper. He turned his head and his eyes caught sight of a small cage pushed into the corner. Inside, curled up and shaking, was a child. Not a human child, but an alien. Small arms, thin body, silver blue skin, with faint glowing lines running across it. The child's eyes were large, golden, and filled with fear. The guards near the cage didn't even bother to stand straight. They laughed and kicked the bars. One of them shouted, "This one is worthless. Too weak, too small, won't survive long." The other replied with a cruel grin, "Maybe we sell it cheap for sport, someone can use it as a toy." Daniel's hands curled into fists. He knew he should keep walking. He knew it was not his fight, but his feet refused to move. The child lifted her head, her eyes locking with his, and in that instant, something struck his heart like a blade. She looked at him not as a stranger, but as if begging him silently, "Help me." Daniel stepped closer. The merchant noticed and smirked. "Human traveler, you want to buy this broken one? Worthless thing, but maybe you like strange pets." The crowd around chuckled. Some aliens shouted bids for other cages. Ignoring the small child, Daniel asked, his voice low, "How much?" The merchant laughed. "Too much for garbage, but if you want it, pay 50 credits. Daniel knew that was more than triple the price of a healthy slave. They were trying to cheat him, trying to push him away. But Daniel's voice was steady. "I'll pay." He pulled out his card and placed it down. The crowd went quiet for a moment, surprised that a human would waste money on something useless. The merchant frowned, realizing his joke had turned into a real sale. Before he could speak again, Daniel pushed the credits forward, his eyes never leaving the child. The guards grumbled, but unlocked the cage. The door opened with a loud creak. The child crawled out, weak legs shaking, almost falling. Daniel quickly bent down and lifted her gently into his arms. She was light, far too light for a child her size. He could feel her bones through her skin, and her body trembled. Against his chest, the child whispered something in her alien tongue. The words broken, scared, but soft. Daniel did not understand, but he held her closer. "You're safe now," he whispered, even if she could not understand his language. The crowd muttered, some laughed, others spat at the ground, calling him foolish, but Daniel didn't care. He turned to walk away, but a hand stopped him. One of the guards stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "You can't just take it like that, human. This one belongs to the market still." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "I paid. She's mine now." The guard sneered. "Maybe to the merchant, but not to us. You think you can walk away?" "No. She has a price in blood." Other guards moved closer, circling Daniel and the child. The crowd began to cheer, sensing a fight. Daniel's heart pounded, his arms tightening around the small alien girl. The child pressed her face against his chest as if hiding from the world. Daniel's voice came out sharp. "You'll have to kill me before I give her back." The guards grinned and pulled out their shock sticks, electricity sparking in the dark air. The smell of danger filled the marketplace, and whispers spread through the crowd. "Stupid human. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." But far in the shadows, someone else was watching. A cloaked figure with eyes like fire. They did not cheer. They did not laugh. They simply stared at the human holding the alien child, and a thin smile formed across their face. Daniel stood ready, his body tense, his grip firm. He had saved the child, but now the real test was about to begin. And in the silence before the fight, the golden eyes of the child met his again. This time there was no fear, only hope. And Daniel knew in his heart he could never walk away. The air in the market grew heavy. Crowds pushed closer. forming a circle around Daniel and the child in his arms. The guards' shock sticks buzzed with blue fire, crackling like angry serpents. Daniel's heart beat fast, but his eyes stayed hard. He could not show fear, not with the small alien girl trembling against his chest. "Give her back," the lead guard barked, his teeth sharp and yellow. "You think credits free you? In the market of chains, blood pays the final price." The other guards laughed, raising their weapons higher. The crowd cheered, waiting for the fight, some throwing coins, others shouting bets. Daniel felt the girl's small fingers clutch his shirt. Her breath was weak and fast. He whispered softly, "Hold on, I won't let them take you." The first guard lunged, striking with his shock stick. Daniel twisted his body, turning so the child was protected. The stick hit his arm, pain shooting through his muscles like fire. He gritted his teeth but did not cry out. The girl gasped, golden eyes wide with fear. Daniel stepped back, balancing his weight. His free hand shot forward, grabbing the guard's wrist and pulling hard. The shock stick clattered to the ground, sparks jumping across the dirt. The crowd roared louder, half with laughter, half with surprise. A human fighting alien guards was rare and dangerous. Another guard attacked from the side, swinging his stick. Daniel lowered his shoulder, taking the blow against his back. Pain stabbed through him, his vision blurred for a moment. Still he moved, kicking out with his boot. The guard stumbled backward, crashing into a stall of broken metal parts. Blood dripped from Daniel's lip. The child looked up at him, her voice small. "Don't leave me." The words were broken, but he understood enough. His chest tightened, not from pain, but from determination. He whispered back, "Never." The lead guard snarled and pulled a blade from his belt. It glowed faint red, humming with energy. "Stupid human," he hissed. "You'll die for a thing not even worth a coin." The crowd went silent, waiting for blood. Daniel tightened his grip on the girl, shifting her to one arm. His other hand reached for the fallen shock stick. He lifted it, sparks running down the shaft. The guard swung his blade fast, aiming for Daniel's chest. Daniel blocked with the shock stick, the weapons clashing with a flash of light. The impact sent a jolt through his bones, almost tearing the stick from his hand. But he held on, forcing the blade back. The girl buried her face in his chest, whispering words he could not understand. Her skin glowed faintly brighter, as if her fear and hope both were alive inside her. The fight raged for minutes that felt like hours. Daniel's arm was burned, his side bruised, blood dripping from cuts. Yet he stood, never letting the child fall. Every move he made was not for himself, but for her. The crowd, once cheering, now grew quiet, watching in awe. A human refusing to surrender, bleeding yet unbroken. At last, Daniel struck hard, slamming the shock stick against the guard's chest. The alien screamed as sparks danced across his body, collapsing to the ground. The other guards froze, uncertain. No human had ever stood against them and lived. Daniel's breath came heavy, his clothes torn, but his eyes were still sharp. He raised the stick and shouted, "Anyone else?" The silence was broken only by the sound of the child's soft whimper. Then slowly the guards stepped back, dragging their leader away. The merchant who had sold the child cursed under his breath, but even he did not dare challenge Daniel. Now, the crowd began to murmur, some calling him mad, others calling him brave. Daniel lowered the stick and dropped it aside. He shifted the child gently in his arms, wiping blood from his face with his sleeve. The girl looked at him, tears on her cheeks. Her voice was faint but clear this time. "Why? Save me?" Daniel met her golden eyes, his answer simple. "Because no one else would." From the shadows, the cloaked figure still watched. Their eyes glowed faint red, a smile playing across their face. They whispered to themselves, "The human bleeds yet protects. Interesting." Then they turned and vanished into the night. Daniel didn't notice. He walked slowly out of the market, every step heavy, every muscle aching. But inside his arms, the child finally relaxed. Her trembling easing. For the first time, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest. Daniel felt the weight of her trust settle deep in his chest. And though blood marked his skin, he knew he had already paid the price. Not with credits, but with his own pain. and he would pay again, if it meant keeping her safe. As the neon lights of the market faded behind him, a new thought rose in Daniel's mind. He had rescued the child, yes, but the danger was not over. In fact, this was only the beginning. The night air outside the Market of Chains was colder than Daniel expected. The streets were quieter here, but the echoes of the crowd's laughter and the sting of his wounds still followed him. Every step burned, every breath was heavy. But he kept walking, the child held tightly in his arms. He reached an abandoned corner of the city where broken signs flickered and the smell of old oil filled the air. There, beneath the shadow of a ruined arch, he finally set the girl down. She stood unsteady on her feet, small legs shaking. Her thin arms crossed over her chest. Daniel crouched low to meet her eyes, golden and wide, glowing faint in the dark. He tried a gentle smile, though his lip bled. "You're safe now." The girl tilted her head, not understanding all his words. She whispered something in her own tongue, sharp, soft syllables Daniel couldn't follow. But then she placed her small hand against his wounded arm. Her skin glowed brighter, silver blue light flowing like water from her palm. Daniel felt warmth spread through him, the pain dulling, the blood slowing. He stared in shock, whispering, "What are you?" The girl pulled back, frightened by his voice. Her shoulders curled inward as if expecting him to strike her. Daniel quickly shook his head. No, it's all right." He touched his chest gently. "Daniel," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to her, waiting. She blinked, hesitant, then whispered, "Lyra." The sound was fragile, almost like music. Daniel repeated it softly. "Lyra." Her eyes widened a little. He had spoken her name correctly. A faint smile touched her lips, the first smile he had seen from her. From that moment, something shifted. They were no longer stranger and rescued child. Something more delicate had begun to form. A bond built not from words but from trust. Daniel felt it deep in his chest, and he knew this girl was no ordinary child. Lyra sat down beside him on the broken stone. She looked at his torn jacket, then at her own thin clothes, little more than rags from the cage. Daniel sighed, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around her small frame. She clutched it tightly, golden eyes looking up at him with silent gratitude. But even as warmth grew between them, danger still pressed close. In the distance, patrol lights flashed across the sky. The slavers would not forgive what he had done. Bounty hunters would already be spreading his name. Daniel knew he had only hours before the city became a trap. Still, for a short moment, he allowed himself to breathe. Lyra leaned against his side, her small hand resting over his ribs. Her touch was light, but it carried a strange calm. Daniel closed his eyes for a second, thinking, "What have I gotten myself into?" When he opened them again, Lyra was staring at him curiously. She reached up, touching his face where blood had dried. Then she spoke softly. "Father?" Daniel froze. His breath caught. She didn't mean it. Not fully. He could hear the question in her voice, but the word cut into him deeper than any blade. He swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "Not father. Daniel," he said carefully, pointing again to his chest. But Lyra shook her head slowly, whispering again, "Father." Her voice was firmer this time, though still weak. Daniel didn't correct her again. Instead, he pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her small shoulder. As the hours passed, he gathered supplies from abandoned stalls, a flask of water, some dry food, cloth to bind his wounds. Lyra watched silently, never straying far. At one point she began humming softly, an alien melody, strange yet soothing. It echoed in the ruined street like a song of survival. Daniel found himself listening, his chest tightening. It was the sound of a child trying to remember peace, but shadows were never far. From the rooftops, figures moved, silently. Hunters with glowing eyes marked their target. They had seen the human walk away with the girl. They whispered into comms, "The cursed child lives. The bounty rises." Daniel didn't notice them yet. He was too focused on keeping Lyra warm. But the danger was crawling closer with every heartbeat. As dawn painted the horizon in pale light, Daniel looked at Lyra. She was asleep now, wrapped in his coat, her small chest rising and falling softly. Her face looked peaceful, almost innocent. For a moment she was just a child, not a slave, not a cursed being. Daniel brushed a strand of silver hair from her face and whispered, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." But as the city stirred awake, shouts began in the distance. The guards had found the trail of blood he left behind. Horns blew, heavy boots marched. The hunters above smiled coldly, readying their weapons. Daniel stood, muscles aching but spirit unbroken. He lifted Lyra into his arms once more. The bond between them was no longer weak. It was something unspoken, something powerful. And though the galaxy itself seemed to rise against them, he knew one truth as clear as the morning light. He was no longer walking alone. He had given the child a chance at life, and in return, she had given him a reason to fight. The name Lyra was now carved into his heart, and he was ready to bleed again to keep that bond alive. The city was no longer safe. Daniel could feel it in the way the streets whispered, the way shadows seemed to follow him. Every corner had eyes. Every sound felt like a warning. Lyra was awake again, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck as he carried her. Her golden eyes searched the sky nervously, sensing the same danger he did. By dawn, bounty posters were already glowing across neon walls, the human's face marked with red letters, "Wanted for theft of slave property." Beside his image was Lyra's. Her glowing markings circled and labeled, "Cursed heir." The reward was high enough to tempt hunters from every corner of the galaxy. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had bought her fair. He had bled for her. But still they hunted them. He whispered to her, "We need to leave this world." Lyra tilted her head, not understanding every word, but her small fingers gripped his shirt tighter. She trusted him. That was enough. Near the starport, ships roared with engines ready. Merchants shouted over prices, pilots cursed over cargo, but guards moved in squads, checking every face, every hand. Daniel pulled his hood low. Moving carefully through the crowd, Lyra pressed close, her silver blue skin hidden beneath his coat. For a moment it seemed they might slip through unnoticed. But then a sharp voice cut the air. "There, the human!" Daniel turned sharply. 3 bounty hunters pushed through the crowd, weapons raised, the people scattered, screaming. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. He ran, pushing through narrow passages, the hunters firing behind him. Bolts of red, energy tore through the walls, sparks raining down. Lyra buried her face against him, trembling. Daniel held her tighter, whispering, "Hold on, just hold on." He reached a docking bay where a rusty freighter sat unattended. The hull was dented, the paint peeling, but its engine lights still glowed faint blue. It was a chance, a slim one. But a chance. Daniel sprinted up the ramp, hitting the control panel with his elbow. The door hissed shut just as the hunters reached the bay, their shots bouncing off the metal. Inside, the ship smelled of oil and dust. Daniel lowered Lyra into a seat, then rushed to the cockpit. The controls were old, wires hanging, lights flickering. He muttered under his breath, "Come on, fly for me." His hands moved fast, pulling switches, pressing keys. The engines roared, sputtered, then finally came alive. The freighter shuddered, lifting slowly. Hunters fired from below, but the ship tore free from the dock. Blasting into the dark sky, Lyra clutched the armrest, her eyes wide. The stars spread open before them as the ship broke atmosphere. Daniel leaned back, sweat dripping from his brow. He whispered, "We made it." But Lyra shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, more come." And she was right. From the black of space, small ships lit up their trackers. Hunters had followed them already, engines burning bright as they gave chase. Red lights flashed on Daniel's console. Lock-ons. Warnings. Danger. He muttered, "They won't stop." His hand tightened on the controls. He had no weapons, no shields worth trusting. But he had something else. Instinct. The freighter dove between broken satellites, twisting through debris. Fields, Hunter ships fired, beams slicing through metal, exploding old wrecks into flaming clouds. Lyra cried out, gripping the seat. Daniel shouted back, "Don't let go!" He spun the freighter hard, scraping past the husk of an old cruiser. The hunters followed close, but one smashed into debris, vanishing in fire. Still 2 more chased them, their engines faster, stronger. Daniel pushed the throttle until the ship screamed. The metal frame rattled, alarms blared. But then, a gap appeared ahead. A jump gate, glowing faintly, half broken, half alive. It was unstable, dangerous, but it was their only way out. The hunters fired again, blasts tearing into the freighter's side. Sparks flew, smoke filled the cockpit. Daniel coughed, his vision swimming, but his voice was steady. "Hold on, Lyra." He pulled the ship into the gate, engines screaming as the glow swallowed them. For a heartbeat, silence. Then stars bent and twisted, colors swirling like liquid fire. Lyra cried out, covering her glowing eyes. Daniel held the controls firm, guiding the freighter through the storm of lights, and then, darkness cleared. They burst into a new sector, stars shining cold and endless. No hunters in sight, only silence. Daniel leaned back, his chest rising and falling fast. The freighter groaned, but it had survived. He turned, seeing Lyra trembling but alive. Her eyes met his, filled with both fear and wonder. He reached out, placing his hand over hers. "It's over. We're safe. For now." But even as he spoke, a warning light blinked on the console. The ship was damaged, fuel leaking, systems unstable. They couldn't keep running forever. Daniel knew this was only a pause, not an end. Lyra slowly leaned closer, her small head resting against his arm. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Home?" Daniel stared at the stars. He had no answer. He didn't know where home was anymore. But he made a promise then, his voice low but steady. "I'll build us one. Somewhere no one can touch you. Somewhere you'll never be in chains again." Lyra's golden eyes blinked, a faint smile touching her lips, and in that moment Daniel realized something. He wasn't just running anymore. He was protecting the only family he had left, far away, across the stars. Messages were already spreading. The human had escaped with the cursed child. Empires whispered her name. Hunters sharpened their blades. The chase was not over. It had only begun. The freighter drifted through dark space, its engines weak, its hull scarred. Daniel worked at the controls, sweat on his brow, trying to keep the old ship alive. Every warning light blinked red. Every sound was a groan of tired metal. But in the corner of his eye, he kept looking at Lyra, curled up in the co-pilot seat. She was humming softly, a strange alien song, her golden eyes half closed. Daniel's chest tightened. She should have been laughing, playing, living like a child, not hunted, not caged, not flying with a man who barely knew how to keep them alive. He whispered to himself, "What am I doing?" For hours the ship drifted toward the edge of a star system. At last they found a small station, half abandoned, half forgotten. Lights flickered weakly across its rings. It was a place smugglers used, a place the law had forgotten. Daniel guided the freighter in, the docking clamps closing with a groan. Inside the station, the air smelled of rust and oil. Merchants in ragged clothes shouted over prices. Mercenaries leaned against walls. It was no place for a child, but Daniel had no choice. He needed supplies, fuel, and food. He carried Lyra through the station, her small hand holding his tightly. She stayed close, eyes darting at the strange faces staring at her. Daniel glared back at anyone who looked too long. He stopped at a stall, buying bread and water with the last of his credits. Lyra's eyes lit up when he gave her the food. She ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might be taken away. Watching her broke something inside Daniel. She had lived her whole life never knowing safety, never knowing family. And now she looked at him as if he was all she had. He sat down beside her, his voice low. "Lyra, I'm not your blood, but I won't leave you." She tilted her head, not understanding every word. But when he said father, She smiled faintly, repeating it back. Father. The word hit him like a knife and a gift at once. He was only a traveler, a man with no family, no home. But when she called him that, he felt something awaken inside him, a duty heavier than steel but warmer than light. As the hours passed, Daniel began to make plans. He could leave Lyra at some safe colony, maybe with people who could care for her. She would be safer without him, safer away from the hunters and the Empire chasing her. But every time he thought of it, his chest tightened. She would look at him with those golden eyes and whisper, "Father." And he knew the truth. He could never give her up. That night, in the broken quarters of the station, Daniel sat awake. Lyra slept beside him, wrapped in his jacket, breathing softly. Daniel stared at the stars outside the cracked window. He thought of his past, of Earth, of mistakes he had made, of how he had lost his family long ago. And now, by fate or chance, this child had come into his life. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is my second chance." His decision was clear now, clear as fire in his chest. He would not just protect Lyra, he would raise her, teach her, give her the life stolen from her, even if the galaxy itself rose against him, but danger was never far. As Daniel closed his eyes, mercenaries whispered in the dark halls of the station. They had seen the girl. They had seen the glowing lines on her skin. One of them muttered, "The cursed air. There's a price on her head." Another replied, "The human thinks he's her father, but we'll see how long that lasts." They made plans, sharp knives hidden under cloaks, waiting for the right moment to strike. Morning came with the sound of alarms. The station shook as ships docked. Imperial scouts, their banners glowing red. The Empire had found the trail. Daniel woke instantly, pulling Lyra close. Her eyes widened with fear. "Father?" she whispered. Daniel nodded, his voice steady. "I'm here. I'll keep you safe." Mercenaries rushed the corridors. Hunters shouted orders. The Empire's voice boomed across speakers. "Return the stolen child. The human will be spared if he surrenders her." Daniel's jaw clenched. He looked at Lyra, trembling but trusting. This was the moment, the choice that would shape both their lives. He could give her up, save himself, walk away, or he could defy the Empire, defy the galaxy, and keep her as his own. Lyra pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering, "Don't leave me." Tears shone in her golden eyes. Daniel's arms tightened around her, his decision burning in his heart like iron. He whispered back, "I'm your father now, and no one takes you from me." As soldiers stormed the station, Daniel turned toward the docking bay. He would fight, he would bleed, he would run. But he would never let her fall into chains again. The father's choice had been made, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant when a human decided to protect his child. The station shook with heavy footsteps. Imperial soldiers moved through the steel corridors like a wave of fire. Their armor glowed under the red lights, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Voices shouted orders, boots pounded against the metal floors. Daniel stood at the edge of the docking bay, holding Lyra's hand, his heart racing. "Father?" Lyra whispered, her golden eyes wide. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't let go." His voice was calm, but inside he felt the storm. He knew they could not fight an empire head-on. Yet he also knew he would rather die than give her back. The first squad appeared at the far end of the bay, weapons raised. One of the soldiers shouted, "Human, you hold what belongs to the crown. Surrender the child and your life will be spared." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the soldiers. "She doesn't belong to you," he said firmly, his voice echoing across the bay. "She's not your slave, not your heir. She's my daughter now." The soldiers hesitated, confused by his defiance. Some laughed behind their helmets, others muttered about his madness, but their leader growled, "You dare claim blood that is not yours. She is the cursed heir of the Empire. Hand her over, or we will burn this station to ash." Daniel's chest tightened at those words, cursed heir. He remembered the rumors, the glowing marks on Lyra's skin, the healing light she carried. This was why they hunted her. Why she, had been thrown into chains. She was more than just a slave. She was a threat to a throne. And now he understood. By protecting her, he had made himself an enemy of an empire. The mercenaries hiding in the station halls began to creep closer. They had planned to sell Lyra themselves, but now they saw a greater danger. Some backed away, whispering, "Not worth it. The Empire is here." Others stayed, their knives ready, thinking they could snatch the girl in the chaos. Lyra pressed close against Daniel's back. She whispered something in her language, her voice trembling. Daniel couldn't understand every word, but he knew the meaning. Fear, trust, hope. He looked down at her, his voice low and steady. "I won't let them take you. I promise." The soldiers raised their weapons, beams of red light glowing at their tips. Daniel grabbed the fallen shock stick he had kept since the market. It buzzed weakly, sparks dancing across its surface. It was no match for rifles, but it was all he had. The soldiers moved forward in formation, then suddenly the station's lights flickered. A voice, low and smooth, echoed through the bay. "Still alive, human? Interesting." From the shadows at the top of the bay, the cloaked figure appeared, the same one who had watched at the Market of Chains. Their cloak fluttered as they stepped forward, their eyes glowing like burning coals. The soldiers turned, confused. "Identify yourself." But the figure only laughed softly. "The child does not belong to you nor to this human. She belongs to fate." Daniel tightened his grip on Lyra. He did not know if this figure was friend or foe. But he knew one thing. The shadows had returned, and they carried danger with them. The figure raised a hand, and dark energy rippled. Across the bay, the soldiers stumbled as their weapons shorted, sparks exploding in their hands. Screams filled the air as power ripped through metal. Lyra cried out, clutching her head, her markings glowing brighter than ever. Daniel knelt, holding her close, whispering, "Stay with me." The cloaked figure's voice cut through the chaos. "You think you can protect her, human? You cannot even protect yourself. The Empire will never stop. The hunters will never stop. She is fire in the dark, and fire always burns." Daniel lifted his head, sweat dripping down his face, his voice harsh but steady. "Maybe I can't stop them all, but I can stop them today. I can protect her now, and that's enough." The figure tilted their head, studying him. A strange smile curved their lips. "We will see." Then they vanished in a storm of black smoke, leaving only silence behind. The soldiers struggled to recover, their weapons half dead. Their leader shouted, "Regroup, take them!" Daniel pulled Lyra toward the freighter, his arm burning with pain, his legs heavy. But Lyra suddenly lifted her small hand, her markings glowing like suns. A wave of golden light burst from her, throwing soldiers back as if struck by a storm. The bay shook, metal screamed, and silence followed. Daniel stared in shock, his breath caught. Lyra swayed, weak, then collapsed against him. He caught her, holding her gently, whispering, "It's all right. I've got you." Her power. It was real, it was dangerous, but it was also beautiful. He carried her into the freighter, sealing the ramp as alarms blared. The engines roared, fire tearing through the bay as the ship lifted. Behind them, the station burned with chaos. Soldiers scattered, mercenaries fled. And far above, the Empire's ships began to move, hungry for pursuit. Daniel held Lyra close in the cockpit as stars opened before them again. He whispered to himself, his voice, rough but sure, "They will never stop, but neither will I." And in the darkness of space, the shadow's words echoed in his mind. She belongs to fate. Daniel didn't know what that meant yet. But he knew one truth, as sharp as fire in his heart. No matter what destiny planned, Lyra was his daughter now, and he would fight the galaxy itself to keep her safe. The freighter drifted through endless space. Its hull was cracked, its engines tired, but it was still alive. Just like the two souls inside it, Daniel sat in the cockpit, eyes heavy with exhaustion, his hands steady on the controls. Beside him, Lyra slept wrapped in his jacket, her golden eyes closed, her chest rising softly. The light from her markings had faded, but its memory still burned in Daniel's mind. He could not forget the way she had pushed back soldiers with a storm of light. A child carrying power greater than any weapon, And he knew now why the Empire wanted her. She was not only an heir, not only a symbol, she was a force that could change the galaxy. But to him, she was not a weapon. She was his daughter, his family. And that truth weighed heavier in his heart than any Empire's threat. As stars stretched before them, a transmission crackled on the console. A cold voice spoke, "Human, you cannot run forever. The girl is ours. Return her and your death will be merciful." Daniel leaned forward, his jaw tight. "She's not yours. She'll never be yours." He shut off the signal, his voice steady as he whispered to himself. "Not while I breathe." Lyra stirred. Waking slowly, she blinked up at him, whispering, "Father." Daniel turned, forcing a smile. "I'm here." She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. Her small voice trembled. "Scared?" Daniel bent closer, pressing his forehead. "To hers, I know, but you're not alone anymore." The freighter shuddered. An alarm screamed. On the radar, Imperial ships closed in, 3 of them, their engines glowing like angry stars. Daniel's heart pounded. He had run, he had fought, but now there was no more running. The choice he made at the station returned to him now. He would fight as a father, not as a fugitive. He moved fast, strapping Lyra into the seat, his voice calm, though fire raged inside him. "Listen to me, Lyra. Whatever happens, don't be afraid. You're stronger than you know." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, whispering, "With you?" The ships closed in, weapons locking. The first shot ripped across the freighter's side, shaking the cabin, sparks raining down. Daniel gripped the controls, weaving through debris fields, but the hunters were skilled. Their aim sharp, their pursuit merciless. "Father," Lyra cried as another blast tore through the hull. Daniel turned, his voice strong. "Look at me, Lyra. Look at me, not them." Her golden eyes locked on his, her breathing steadying. In that moment, she trusted him more than the stars themselves. The Empire's voice came again, booming across the comms. "Surrender the cursed heir, human. She is not yours to keep." Daniel's jaw clenched. His voice thundered back. "She's not cursed. She's mine." At his words, Lyra's markings began to glow again, brighter, stronger than before. The cabin filled with golden light. Daniel shielded his eyes, but he did not look away. Lyra's small hands lifted, trembling, but filled with will. A wave of energy burst outward from the ship, golden and pure. The pursuing vessels staggered, their systems failing. Alarms screamed across their decks. Weapons flickered. Engines died. One by one, the ships broke formation, drifting powerless into the void. Silence filled the stars again. Lyra collapsed back into her seat, weak but alive. Daniel rushed to her side, pulling her close, his voice breaking. "You saved us." Her eyes fluttered open, her voice soft. "We saved together." Daniel smiled, tears stinging his eyes. "Yes, together." For hours, the freighter drifted in silence. Daniel worked to repair what he could, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of what lay ahead. More hunters, more battles, more shadows. The Empire would never stop chasing them. But he also thought of Lyra's smile, the way she called him father. And he knew the fight was worth every wound, every scar. Finally, they found a small world. Green, quiet, hidden among nebula clouds. Daniel guided the freighter down, landing softly on the meadow plains. The air was clean, the sky wide. For the first time, there was no sound of chains, no sound of war. He stepped out, carrying Lyra in his arms. She looked around with wonder, her golden eyes reflecting the sky. She whispered softly, "Home?" Daniel's throat tightened. He had promised her once, and now he could finally answer, "Yes, Lyra, home." He set her down, watching her take her first steps on free soil. She laughed, a sound so pure it made his heart ache. She turned back. To him, her arms wide, and Daniel lifted her high into the sky. Her laughter echoed across the meadow, brighter than any star. In that moment, Daniel understood something deep and simple. He was no longer running, no longer lost. He had found Family in the unlikeliest of places. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. And no empire, no shadow, no curse could ever take that away. As the sun set behind the hills, Daniel and Lyra stood hand in hand. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of enemies, but it was also full of hope, and together they would face it not as slave and rescuer, not as cursed heir and protector, but as father and daughter. A family built not by fate, but by choice. And in that truth, Daniel finally found peace.